Alphonse Gabriel Capone, better known as Al Capone, was born on January 17th, 1899, in the bustling borough of Brooklyn, New York. His parents, Gabriel and Teresa Capone, were Italian immigrants who had come to the United States seeking a better life. They worked hard, his father as a barber and his mother as a seamstress, and instilled traditional values of family and faith in their 9 children. But young Al was different from his siblings. While his family hoped he would follow a path of hard work and honesty, the chaotic and crime-ridden streets of Brooklyn captured his attention. Al grew up in the rough neighborhood of Navy Yard, where opportunities for the poor were few, and gang violence was a part of daily life. In school, Al was a bright but unruly student. His education ended abruptly at the age of 14, after he struck a teacher who had disciplined him harshly. With no formal schooling to guide him, Al turned to the streets. He joined local gangs like the South Brooklyn Rippers and the 40 Thieves Juniors, learning the rules of survival, loyalty, and power. It was during his teenage years that Al met Johnny Torrio, a seasoned mobster who would later become his mentor. Torrio introduced Capone to organized crime, a world far more structured and profitable than petty street gang activity. But before that chapter began, Al worked at odd jobs, including as a bouncer and bartender at Frankie Yale's Harvard Inn, a saloon on Coney Island. It was here that Al earned the nickname Scarface. During an altercation with a customer over an insult to the man's sister, Capone was slashed across the left side of his face with a knife. The scars became his trademark, though Capone was self-conscious about them and often claimed they were from a war injury. As Al honed his street smarts and toughness, Torrio offered him a chance to leave Brooklyn behind and head to Chicago, a city that would become the stage for Capone's meteoric rise. In the early 1920s, Al Capone moved to Chicago, joining Johnny Torrio's criminal empire. Torrio, a calculated and business-minded gangster, had built a thriving enterprise centered on bootlegging, gambling, and prostitution. The timing couldn't have been better. In 1920, Prohibition had gone into effect, banning the sale and distribution of alcohol across the United States. While the law aimed to curb crime and improve public morality, it had the opposite effect. A vast underground market for alcohol emerged, and organized crime syndicates like Torrio's took control of the lucrative trade. Capone quickly proved himself invaluable to Torrio. He wasn't just a tough enforcer. He had a knack for strategy and a vision for expanding their operations. Capone's big break came in 1925, when Torrio was ambushed and nearly killed in a mob hit. Shaken, Torrio decided to retire and handed the reins to his protege. At just 26 years old, Al Capone became the leader of Chicago's most powerful crime syndicate. Under Capone's leadership, the organization flourished. He expanded their bootlegging operations, smuggling alcohol from Canada, and running secret breweries and distilleries across Chicago. Speakeasies, hidden bars where people could drink illegally, became a cultural phenomenon, and Capone's network supplied them all. Capone didn't shy away from the public eye. He frequented high-end nightclubs, wore tailored suits, and mingled with celebrities. But behind the glamour was a violent reality. Rival gangs, including those led by Dean O'Banion and Bugs Moran, fought bitterly for control of Chicago's illegal liquor trade. Capone responded with brutal efficiency, using assassinations, bombings, and intimidation to eliminate his enemies. One of Capone's most infamous acts was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. Although Capone was in Florida at the time and maintained plausible deniability, the massacre bore the hallmarks of his tactics. 7 members of Bugs Moran's gang were lined up against a wall and gunned down by men posing as police officers. The event shocked the nation and solidified Capone's reputation as a ruthless crime boss. By the late 1920s, Al Capone was at the height of his power. His organization controlled illegal breweries, speakeasies, gambling dens, and brothels. The sheer scale of his operations made him one of the wealthiest men in America, with an estimated annual income of $100 million, a staggering figure for the time. Despite his criminal empire, Capone worked hard to cultivate a Robin Hood-like image. He opened soup kitchens during the Great Depression, donated money to charities, and portrayed himself as a man of the people. "I'm just giving the people what they want," he famously said, referring to his alcohol operations. But the public's fascination with Capone couldn't mask the growing scrutiny from law enforcement. Local police were often powerless against him due to widespread corruption. Capone had judges, politicians, and officers on his payroll. However, the federal government was another story. Agents like Eliot Ness and his Untouchables began targeting Capone's operations with relentless determination. While Ness disrupted Capone's bootlegging routes, it was a different set of investigators who found a crack in Capone's armor. Despite his wealth, Capone had never filed an income tax return. The government realized that tax evasion, rather than murder or bootlegging, could be the key to bringing him down. In 1931, federal prosecutors charged Capone with tax evasion. Although the charges seemed minor compared to his violent crimes, the government's case was solid. Capone, who had always been a master manipulator, suddenly found himself unable to buy or bully his way out of trouble. During his trial, Capone's legal team attempted to bribe jurors, but the judge thwarted their efforts by swapping the jury at the last moment. In October 1931, Capone was convicted on multiple counts of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Capone began his sentence at the U.S. Penitentiary in Atlanta, but rumors of corruption led to his transfer to Alcatraz, the notorious island prison in San Francisco Bay. At Alcatraz, Capone's influence meant nothing. Isolated and stripped of his former power, he began to deteriorate both mentally and physically. Syphilis, which he had contracted years earlier, began to ravage his body and mind. By the time Capone was released on parole in 1939, his health had declined so severely that he was no longer seen as a threat. The once feared gangster was now a broken man. After his release, Al Capone retired to his mansion in Palm Island, Florida. His days of commanding an empire were long gone. Suffering from severe neurological damage caused by syphilis, Capone spent his final years in seclusion, cared for by his family. On January 25, 1947, Capone died of a heart attack at the age of 48. His death marked the end of an era, but his story remained a source of fascination for generations. Al Capone's rise and fall reflect the complexities of Prohibition-era America, a time when the thirst for illegal alcohol created a world of opportunity for those willing to break the rules. To some, Capone was a symbol of the American dream turned nightmare. To others, he was a larger-than-life figure whose ambition and ruthlessness knew no bounds. Though his empire crumbled, Al Capone's legacy endures as a cautionary tale of power, crime, and the relentless pursuit of justice.